Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Denys Kolesnyk. French President Emmanuel Macron has said that he will discuss extending the French nuclear deterrent to European allies to protect the continent in the face of threats from Russia. In a televised evening address to the nation on Wednesday, he described Russia as a threat to France and Europe and said he had decided to, quote, open the strategic debate on the protection of our allies on the European continent by our nuclear deterrent. Joining me now to discuss this is Denys Kolesnyk, president at the MENA Research Center. Denys, so glad to have you here with us this evening on World Talks. Now, before we begin, I'd like to invite you to listen to one of the statements that Emmanuel Macron, French President Emmanuel Macron, made yesterday evening.
Never before has our freedom been so threatened. The freedom of peoples is under attack by imperialists and annexing powers. The rules of war are being erased. Everyone wants to be exempt from international law, and hope for peace is being dashed in Europe, the Near and Middle East, and in Africa. And when there are no rules, the law of the strongest prevails. The freedom of our Europe is in jeopardy at a time when war has been brought to our soil with the invasion of Ukraine, when the United States has added a form of uncertainty, and when our Europe finds itself on the edge of a vast arc of crises, stretching from the Gulf of Guinea across the Sahel to the Middle East and Iran. Let's be clear, we Europeans must now ensure our own security.
All right, Denys, so Macron says Europe's freedom has never been more threatened and that Europeans must now ensure their own security. Now, is this a turning point for European defense, and does it mean that Europe can no longer rely on the United States? What's your take on that?
You know, there were a lot of different declarations since the Russian aggression against Ukraine in 2022. But with the arrival of Donald Trump to the White House, for obvious reasons, certain moves from the White House were seen and the messages were received. As for the yesterday's declaration, and today there was the SGDSN unveiled actually the revised national security strategy of France. So all of these declarations they're going in line actually with what we observe in the tense security climate. But also it is worth noting that, for example, we have the Loi de Programmation Militaire for 2024 through 2030. And this legislation provides for the 40% increase in the defense spending compared to the last Loi de Programmation Militaire 2019 to 2024. What I'm saying here is basically the declarations. Those are not only declarations, but they are also concrete facts and concrete moves and actions that are going behind those declarations.
All right, what message do you think, you did mention Russia, what message do you think that Macron, with all of this, is actually sending to Russia and to European allies, the fact that he's actually opening the nuclear debate right now?
The question about the nuclear debate is not new. Such kind of propositions were heard a few years ago, I guess in 2020, 2021. But what's important here is that, for example, if you read yet again the updated national security strategy, Revue Nationale Stratégique, we read that France sets 11 strategic objectives, and one of these is actually improving the nuclear deterrent. And with this regard, a few days ago, there was also the press conference of the chief of the armed forces of the French Republic, General Thierry Burkhard, who reiterated that Russia considers France as the number one adversary in Europe, which is quite a strong declaration. And we know that Russians made those declarations not only once, but multiple times. And all of declarations and all of the documents I've just quoted mentioned that Russia has increased in its aggressive and hostile actions, not only against France, but also against Europe, with regard to cyber attacks, with regard to sabotage, espionage, and even the nuclear threat, threatening the European Union and NATO and France with regard to the war in Ukraine.
Do you think that France can realistically take over the United States' role as Europe's security guarantor? How do you view that?
It is obviously impossible, but France and the United Kingdom, and recently Emmanuel Macron was in London, and there was a deal signed with Great Britain, and so France and the Great Britain, there are two key countries in this coalition of the willing with regard to ending the war in Ukraine and to ensuring the security in Europe. Also, what's important is that back in May, there was a deal signed by France with Poland, a new strategic partnership that provides for more important security and defense cooperation. And also, if I go back to this renewed national security strategy that was unveiled today, we see that one of the key goals is to make sure that France is considered a reliable partner with regard to security in Europe, which points to the seriousness of Macron's and the French intentions to become a leader, or one of the leaders, let's say, because it's quite difficult to be one leader in Europe, but one of the key leaders with regard to defending the continent. And also, very important words were said that basically we have to prepare ourselves for the high-intensity war within 3 to 4 years. It's not a warmongering rhetoric, but rather a sober appreciation of the facts that Russia, together with North Korea, with Iran, with China, is strengthening its military, is strengthening its defense, produces more weapons, produces more drones, produces more ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. And so we also have to be more robust. We have to produce more. We have to invest more in our defense. And I guess that's one of the points where France could be one of the leaders with this regard.
Denys, what are some of reactions coming out of other EU countries to Macron's call to arms and rearmament?
Before, when Emmanuel Macron, or let's say France, was talking about this bigger importance to the European security, many countries, especially in Central Eastern Europe, for example, like Poland, were quite skeptical. But today, we understand that nobody can rely on solely, for example, on the United States. And so Europe should be a core alliance with regard to the defense of the Europe and providing the security to the continent, especially with regard to the U.S. shifting priorities towards China and the Indo-Pacific, which is not new, by the way. It's still, we can talk about Obama's pivot to Asia. But I guess what's important here to say is that we observe that there is a growing understanding and growing willingness to cooperate between Western Europe and Eastern Europe. And by the way, in Poland, in Warsaw, there will be the Warsaw Security Forum in end of September, and France is the special guest of this forum this year, which also highlights the importance of Franco-Polish relations, and Poland is one of the key countries with regard to ensuring the defense capabilities in this part of our continent.
Thank you so much, Denys Kolesnyk, for all your input with us here on World Talks this evening.
Thank you.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks. I'm Diana Sky. Thanks for watching.